All right, well, I'm really glad that we're all back together again today. Do people get some breakfast? Because if folks are hungry, you should grab the last of the breakfast burritos and stuff. Anyone seen Patrick? That's who we're missing. Maybe he's grabbing breakfast. Anyway, welcome. It's really good to be back here with everyone. This is a beautiful place. I'm really appreciative that the Santa Ana Pueblo is letting us be here. They're amazing stewards of the land. If you've been outside and looked at the river and the trees and the bosque. I think I'll shut some doors and we can get started. Oh, Patrick! Hey! There you are. Okay. Yay, there's some folks. So we have some new folks joining us this morning. I thought we were going to have a couple, but I want people to be able to introduce themselves. And a reminder again that we're very happy to have translation. So speak slowly so our translators can keep up. So Maria will wave a slow down sign at you. She's not being rude. And if you hear the translators in the back, they're not talking to each other, they're translating. So I think in terms of new folks, I just want to acknowledge that our evaluator is here, Melina Juarez. So she's here in the back, and she's not evaluating you, she's evaluating AFSC. So it's important to us at AFSC to have people evaluating us and giving us feedback and checking in with you. So you'll see in your packets that there is a survey, it's double-sided, and at the end of the day, if you would fill it out over lunch and give it to Maria, you'll get a treat, a really nice treat. So that's the incentive for the evaluation. And it is in English and Spanish, the survey. But we do really appreciate honest feedback, so it's anonymous, so we can keep improving. So I'm happy Melina could join us today. I think there might be some other folks joining us this morning, but maybe they haven't found the room yet. So we'll add them in. So I just wanted to recap yesterday. It was a really wonderful day to spend the morning hearing from folks. So we got to hear from Nicanor and Shane and Matthew from Chamisal, the training program up there. And that was awesome to see their pictures. And then we got to hear from Stephen and Jean from the La Cosecha del Norte Co-op and see photos from Stephen's farm. So we were up in the north. Then we came to the South Valley, and we heard from Fidel, who's part of Agricultura Network, and he invited you all to his new local store opening. And we also heard from Sofia from Los Jardines, and Rebecca from Mountain View, and Lauren from La Placita, and Casey from Agricultura Network. So there's that whole South Valley group. And some got to see some photos and hear some context of what's happening in the South Valley. I think they really brought some political lens to the work, which was helpful. Then we went and we heard from the Jemez folks. So we had 5 folks from the Jemez Pueblo. Beautiful pictures showing us all of the knowledge that's been passed down there and the dreams they have for the work there. John from New Moon Lodge and the Northern 8 Pueblos had really great pictures too of the work happening and step by step, that cold frame that Patrick helped with. And thank you for bringing food with you. John was telling me this morning that their very first harvest was Tuesday, just 2 days ago, so perfect timing. And then we heard from Aaron, an Acoma Pueblo from the Ancestral Lands Conservation Corps and all his youth. And again, beautiful photographs of the work happening and stories about caring for seeds like they're your children. And then the South was last, as Shahid was teasing us, that of course they were the last group. So we heard from Mario and Shahid in the Las Cruces area, from Solitiera Co-op and Taylor Hood Farms, and saw the building of their learning center and the refrigerated truck. And then last but not least, our folks from Chaparral. You guys have come the furthest. Thank you so much for sharing with us and being here with us today. Then I really appreciated the conversation around schools and being able to share with you what's happening with the funding. We want to have a great year this year and getting all that money spent and getting all your food to our kids. And then, of course, we had the small group discussions. And that was really interesting to see what you wanted to talk about in terms of seed saving. A lot of feedback on the seed saving group. And you gave AFSC some good ideas of what would be helpful in terms of inventory, website, tracking, trainings. John had started a group over here around the idea of locally controlled labeling, organic, native labeling, a campaign that could be worked on for that, and take it out of the federal hands. And then the Southern New Mexico group had a chance to meet with each other and talk about ways to support each other, which is exactly the goal of this gathering. So that was neat. And then we ended with the tour of the La Montanita CDC. I'm curious what people thought of that. Was it what you expected? That place, the Cooperative Distribution Center? It's different for me. I'd been to the first building. This is my first time going to the new iteration. But interesting to see cabbage from Taos and chile from Las Cruces and kind of where they're getting stuff from. So hopefully that was helpful. And then dinner last night. You guys are at the Sandia Casino? Yay, and then some of you stayed here. Cool. Well, that was yesterday. What's that? No one won at the casino? That's why people are missing today. Somebody won big. Oh, they're crying in their room. Yeah. So that was a recap of what we did yesterday. So our plans today. So I found it really awesome to hear from you all. You all know that I'm not a farmer. And I really respect people who are called to be a farmer. I think it's a calling, and we need you to eat. We all need our farmers. I come from a family that worked with farm workers. My mom worked for a farm worker union, and I did too. So I'd always seen the really exploitive, destructive kinds of farming. And 10 years ago, coming to AFSC was wonderful to be able to be part of something that is the opposite of an exploitive system that hurts people in the environment, and instead be with people like you all. So really glad to be here with you. So that's our recap. So let me go through the agenda today. This morning, we're going to be talking about what AFSC has been doing and what our vision is for where we want to go. So we want you to hear that and give your thoughts on that. And a lot of our vision is shaped by feedback that we get from you all. And Patrick's going to help me with that discussion. And then my regional directors, associate regional director is here. She's going to share a little bit too, Aisha. And then we're going to talk about cooperatives, why co-ops are good for business. Maria had identified some really neat films, and so she's going to help in that part of the discussion, some short films that I think are pretty inspiring about co-ops. And we know that we have 3 co-ops in the room and other people interested in making co-ops. And then that leads to a discussion about this vision that we have of building a small farmer network in New Mexico. And that's why we have these gatherings, to just build the relationships, because our work is always about the relationships first. And what does it look like to be in relationship and to support each other and build out a network. And then we will end with another lunch in the Bear Room. But of course, you're always welcome to come out here to eat. And we'll do some closing. And again, there's a survey in your packet that we want you to fill out. So that's the day. And we're running close to on time. So. All right. I'm going to ask Aisha to come up then, and Patrick, and we will go to the vision.
Good morning, everyone. I need a minute. I asked for the opportunity to come up and share with you for a moment because, as Syra mentioned earlier, I'll be retiring from the American Friends Service Committee at the end of the month. I needed tissue. And I've been working with this program since I started, 12 years ago.
I know, I don't want you to go.
No, good, I'm good. So yesterday was especially meaningful to me because I was here when the New Mexico program decided that its work would be really restoring, nourishing, nurturing the vision for a thriving small farmer community here in this state. And as someone said to me recently, decolonizing farming and food in New Mexico. So I was here when Don Bustos became the program director, and I know that his vision and his unique combination of skills and expertise made this program possible. And then I've been working with Syra for over 10 years, and she's grown in this program as this program has grown. And then I've worked with Patrick and Maria for the past 5 years. And during that time, we've worked together, not just colleagues, but for me, deep, deep friendships have unfolded over that period of time. And so I know this program is going to be in exceptionally good hands, not just with these individuals, but as this team. And as I listened to you share yesterday, I thought, of course, it's a team, because everyone who got up to share talked about how it takes these very trusted relationships in a team to get farming done, that it can't be done alone. I wanted you to know that this program is part of an international organization. I brought this piece of paper up because I never get the numbers right. AFSC celebrated its 100th anniversary this year. 100 years. I couldn't even quite grasp that because I've only been here 12. And we have programs in 14 countries around the world, every hemisphere. We have offices in 36 cities in the United States. And I work with 5 of the 11 programs in the west part of the United States. Now, the programs I work with are all on different social justice issues and different cultures. So in Arizona, we work on criminal justice. In San Diego, we work on human rights on the border and border violence. In Oakland, I work with a program that works with immigrant youth. In LA, we do work on food justice in an urban community. I'm forgetting somebody. Oh, huh? Well, Denver's immigration too. But my point is that there are many different social justice issues, but what distinguishes this program is that most of the programs we're having to, the focus is more on what we're trying to defeat or defend against. But whenever the New Mexico program gets to talk about its work, they're really talking about how we're realizing the vision of the world that we want right now. And whenever I see them present in AFSC communities, there is such a feeling of inspiration and hope when they finish talking about the work that's happening here in New Mexico and that all of you are a part of. It's the same feeling I had yesterday as I heard the sharing. Because the values that are the core of farming, the way that it's done here, the reverence for life, the reverence for the earth and the things that grow, the value of trust and responsibility and to being able to depend on each other. That's what I know people, whether they're in the city or whether they're in a rural community, that's the vision that we're holding for the world that we want to live in. So I want to thank you for, in a sense, being the people who are out in front. While a lot of us are talking about it and fighting to keep people out of prison or get them out of prison, you're nurturing the vision. I want to turn the floor over to this wonderful team to talk about the next phase of the work that we want to be a part of in New Mexico. But I really, really wanted to take a moment to thank each and every one of you, for how you're contributing, not just to maybe your own family or your own community, but how you're contributing to all the people who work in social justice, who want to see a world like this, based on these values. Thank you so much for the opportunity I've had to be a part of this.
Thank you so much, Aisha. I'm really sad that she's retiring in 2 weeks. She's been my supervisor for 10 years and an amazing mentor. And Aisha lives in Los Angeles, so she flew in from California. But she knows the names of everyone we work with in New Mexico. And she remembers people from 12 years ago. I mean, she's just awesome. She's irreplaceable. So really, really glad that you're here with us today for one last gathering. I don't want you to leave. So Patrick and I are going to then go from there and talk about, Aisha's given that context of the work of the American Friends. And so we want to reflect on what we've been doing in New Mexico. As she said, this is our centennial year, 100 years. And Patrick and I were able to go and talk at our centennial anniversary. And it is fun to be the program that's about what the alternative world that we want and not what we're fighting. And our coworkers joke with us that they want to get transferred to the New Mexico program because they want to stop fighting ICE or stop fighting, come be in this program. So we put up here our mission statement. So in New Mexico, AFSC's had a presence for 41 years, and always identifying with the struggles of local people to empower themselves, particular attention to water and land use. And so that's had different iterations. I think some of you last year came to our 40th anniversary party, so you heard what people were doing the first 10 years, the acequia organizing happening the second 10 years, things like that. So now we're entering our 5th decade. Patrick, do you want to speak a little bit about this work?
I don't know if I can make this fast, but I also want to repeat what Saida said. Aisha has been such an asset, and even she predates me, but my gosh, the support that she's given to this program and to everybody in the state is, it's hard to quantify, really. You're such an asset. But like Saida said, this work is it's been a lot of times we talk about the arc or the trajectory of the office. Ultimately, we do a lot, and in hearing the stuff that all the stuff that people presented yesterday, it's kind of, we're all unified, we're all brought together by farming, but the conditions in our community are different. The conditions across the state are different. We live in very there's a diversity among the state and the conditions. The thing that I'd like to point out, and the thing that guides me, is that the Service Committee in New Mexico, the AFSC, is committed to the words that stay with me is empowerment. The Service Committee is wanting to empower the people of New Mexico, and support self-determination, and that's ultimately what we are doing here with the revitalization and of agriculture. And I know there's one compañero said we don't teach people how to farm, we help people how to remember, because people of the earth were farmers. I mean, I know that's just how we came from, that's where we come from. And the people of the land, and that's the New Mexico program, that's the program with the AFSC knows this as, it's the People of the Land program. And we know that with the resources that were given to us by our Creator, we can sustain ourselves. We have a track record. This is proven. This is not speculation. And so, with the protection and preservation of our resources, we're working on the protection and preservation of the people of the land. And this is an ongoing challenge. And like we've talked about, the struggles of farming. Like oftentimes, sitting in meetings, it's like the farming is hard enough. The farming is hard enough when everything is going right. But then we have all these other challenges, these external challenges and internal challenges that we need to address. And it is a slow process. But it's something that I mean, I feel very fortunate. Like something that Saida and Aisha mentioned, we are not fighting against anything. We're growing an alternative. We're creating an alternative. We're growing our future, and you know, all you farmers know, it doesn't happen overnight. I know we have to respond to market demand and all that stuff, but you know, you can't just snap your fingers and make a crop come out. So we just can't snap our fingers and undo all these and meet all these challenges in one grant year or one fiscal year. Like, you know, this is going to take. This is I think one of the Quakers, we did a tour at our farm in Las Cruces, and one of the Quakers asked, well, like, how long do you foresee this? Do you see this doing this work? And it's like, this work is a lifetime. This work is a multiple lifetimes, and we're standing on people. We're carrying the work forward that other people have dedicated their life. So we're dedicating our lives. And I see it in the commitment in everybody we work with. You all are dedicating your lives to this, and we're just pushing this football down the field, because this work doesn't end, right? Like self-determination, self-governance, that doesn't end. Every day that we wake up, we have decisions to make. And actually, that kind of brings us. I don't know, but that kind of brings us to where we are here as an organization, as an office. With our training program, we oftentimes will talk about using popular education methodology in the same way that we use agriculture as a method. Something Eileen said yesterday, one of the young women from Jemez, it escapes me now how she phrased it, but I can't. I'm gonna butcher it. But anyway, the popular education is a way that we engage, and one of the tenets. These tenets are, you know, theory and practice, and we're putting by farming, we're putting this into practice, and that's one of the things I love about the service committee is their not slogan, but it's faith in action. You know, words are important, and words are what bring us together, but it's our actions that make the difference. But part of that is the reflection, and we are coming off a really large piece of work, and that I encourage you to talk to the evaluator, because she's evaluating us, and we really value honesty, because that's what we're going to learn from. We can talk about all our shining successes, and that's great, but we learn more from the challenges, and we learn more from where we weren't so successful, to put that. And so we're in the middle of that, and I appreciate the process that AFSC engages in, because it's really committed to learning. And sure. Yeah. Okay. So this is a theory. This is a theory of change. That's. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to read that. And it's. Yeah. The challenge is that we are a small organization, even though we're spread out across the country. This office, it's a small organization. It's a small office, and we're taking on some. I think it's pretty big work. So we have to be very thoughtful about where we put our efforts. And I think the visual representation is a way of kind of communicating our the theory of change. I don't know if you want me to go through this. I don't think we need to go through this, but I don't think we need to. Yeah, do you want to do that? Do you want to share what Claudia's doing?
Sure. So one of the things that AFSC does in terms of evaluation is, Melina's here evaluating our current work, but Claudia and Charla said she was going to be here this morning, so maybe she's still trying to find us. They have been reviewing the last 8 years of work. So every piece of work we've done, we had an evaluator. So some of you have met Rosemary Romero, some of you have met Claudia Isaac. So they took all of the evaluations and looked at the findings over an 8-year period, and then many of them met with you. So they did focus groups, they did surveys, they did one-on-one interviews. So I think people in this room participated in that. And that was to see, like, what did they find over 8 years of our work in terms of not just what we think as staff, but what did all of that show? And that report won't be done until the end of the month. But based on that, I made a theory of change, and she had some recommendations for our office. But she looked at 102 documents that were written about this program over 8 years. So just really helpful for us to look at all of the statistics, all of the information, and come up with what she found. And I mean, she's found it's been a very successful program, and but you know, giving us recommendations. So there's kind of this thought about when these things happen, how does it lead to this in terms of our land and our water, and people being able to stay on their land and their water, and what do they need? And today we want to hear from you, things that you need too. So that's what this slide is about, is that she's trying out an idea of hearing from us our theory of change and like putting it visually, but it is kind of hard to read. But that kind of leads me to this last slide, this last piece about AFSC, which is what is our methodology? Because that first slide was what our goal is, what our vision, what our mission is, and this is like ways that we get there. So I don't know if you want to turn it over to you.
Sure. Yeah, so the methodology, like in the last 12 years or however long, the focus on agriculture. Okay. So the way we engage, I don't know. Like we said, we're addressing some really large issues in our community, and the best way that we can do this is by demonstrating the alternatives. You know, there's a lot of talk, and we go to meetings after meetings. You can go to conference after conference, but the best way that we think we can have an effect is by demonstrating the alternative, again, like we're creating an alternative, and we can see, going back to the oldest projects in the South Valley, where we are now in terms of growth with the Agricultura network, and you know, we tracking the growth in the different areas that we're working in, but it really is it's the action, it's the demonstration of this is what a sustainable farm, this is what sustainability looks like. This is, and for farmers, this is what an economically viable farm can look like. For a community, this is what a community food system can look like. So but using agriculture, and we often use the metaphor in our programming is, I know we've talked a little bit about this. It's marrying again the theory and the practice, right? Like we're planting seeds, and every when you plant seeds, some of them germinate, some of them don't. At the end of the year, so you get a harvest, and sometimes you don't. So this process, by doing in the communities and by demonstrating with partners. What is possible? I know from personal experience. I've talked to people, and I've said this is what's possible, and they just will dismiss me because who am I? Who am I? Why are they going to listen to me? But through a tour or by demonstrating, that's what changes people. And I don't like to talk about magic a whole lot, but that interaction with the earth, that process of re-engaging in the earth and with the community and with all of our brothers and sisters, that's what brings about that change. And it's really difficult. So that's why the service community, you know, we talk about the accompaniment, and we want to we accompany the community and hopefully share. I know we can't share if we're not from your community. We don't share all the challenges, but we can be there to help understand and to help work through those challenges. And it's slow. I mean, it's a slow process, just like farming. You know, it takes a whole season to learn a lesson. I know an uncle told me one time, he says, everything I tell you, that took me a year to learn. And we share that, and that's again part of the hands-on farmer training. Oftentimes, I'm the one that interacts with you all, but it's not just my knowledge. I learned it from my father, my uncles, Don, the mentor, everybody that I have worked with. Every single person that I work with has taught me something, and that's and we try to share that, because we don't own the knowledge, and that's it's part of the other piece of our methodology is we incubate programs or projects in the community and step back. We don't own that knowledge. We don't own that. All the success that happens, that's your successes. Those are not. I mean, we want to share in that, but if AFSC goes away, that success stays in the community, and the knowledge that was shared, and all the successes and all the work being done, that stays in the community. So I don't know. I guess I could go through there it is, incubation turnover. I guess I could just read the slide. Yeah, and so moving from in the farm training, there was the last the years of USDA and Kellogg, the last 12 years, I guess, was focused on an intensive, hands-on, full year-long training program. And that, as a matter of fact, we went on to multi-year with apprentices and other forms of as the project evolved. The conditions for that are changing, and this is that learning process, that reflection. So how do we best continue disseminating that knowledge and offering technical support to folks who need that? And that's going into, we don't like this term, but it's something that we've been using internally, talking about training 1.0 and training 2.0. And 2.0 is a more of a more targeted technical assistance, like what we do. We go into a community, do a cold frame, do an irrigation system, plant, do something, and work with people who are not starting out, like the original training program where people completely starting out. And that's just a different way. That's a way to respond to the need in the community while acknowledging the capacity of our office and the program. And it's also a way that we can identify the pieces that are missing in the community, such like infrastructure. Because yesterday I was talking about having the two-hand approach of this work, and the reality is that production is a huge issue, but we also know that there are very real reasons for why production has taken a hit in New Mexico. And so we have to address those challenges to bring the level of production, bring the land back into production, and bring the knowledge for production up. But we also need to address the infrastructure. A lot of infrastructure was either dismantled or intentionally not developed. So we need, like building cold storage, like building up distribution networks. Yeah, mostly infrastructure and distribution. But the other hand is policy and this community and civic engagement. We need to address policies that are detrimental to small farmers or prohibitive to communities who are trying to feed themselves. So I think it's a more flexible way to engage. But again, we're in this process of evaluating our ways forward. Market development is the other big piece. We've talked about developing the co-ops, which addresses some of the production issues, but also like with the schools, we're developing markets. And I know you guys, the farmers markets. A lot of times, if you bring a new product to farmers market, especially in some of the more traditional communities, what is that? What is chard? And not just that, we have to justify the prices that we charge. Like demonstrating economic viability means that we are competing with heavily subsidized and heavily exploitive agricultural practices across the world, across our food system. So developing that market, it's in the same way we're educating about productive practices, we're educating about how we, where the food comes from, how we eat, our health. It's big piece of work. Going all the way back down to the community organizing is what we're talking about in terms of developing cooperatives. You know, we successfully lobbied the state legislature for a very small chunk of money that to pilot a program, and I think we're having some success in that. But after that, we're going to look to the community, to all the farmers and the parents of the children to lobby their legislators as well. This is something that's worth investing in. And it's not just at the state level, you know. We were talking, you know, at the local level with acequias, getting involved in the acequia, making sure it's functioning and everybody's getting water. We're talking about labeling. You know, that's going to be a community organizing effort of how is the community determining and articulating what is important to them versus a federal standard. You know, so this is the community engagement piece. But yeah, so we try to work address a wide range of issues in the way that we can, and I think that's a little bit of it.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. I just want to touch on one that might be new, because I think Patrick explained it really well, and a lot of you have been in either the 1.0 or the 2.0, or you've gotten technical support. We've built more than 30 passive solar cold frames in New Mexico, I think more than anyone else has, and a lot of, raise your hand if you've worked with us on a passive solar cold frame. And it's like, yeah, I think there's like 1, 2, 3, at least 4 in this room, yeah. And then we've done some in Anthony, right? Yeah, we did 2 in Anthony, 3. We did 1 in Chaparral. So yeah, there's a lot of cold frames in the room. The daycares is the one I wanted to point out. That's a new thing. We were talking yesterday about health problems in our children and the rate of juvenile diabetes and childhood obesity. So we did this work with the schools. It's going pretty well. We talked about that yesterday. Daycares is a new thing to get our food to our really little children, get them starting young, eating vegetables and fruits. So we're piloting this year a program in the South Valley, getting food to some daycares there, 6 daycares. One is called Peanut Butter and Jelly, and it's children whose parents are incarcerated. So one of our partners in that, La Placita, actually works with folks who are coming out of prison or are on ankle bracelets. So it's just a beautiful vision to get food to their own kids. But we have 6 daycares who are wanting to buy locally from the South Valley farmers. So that's a new project. And so we'll pilot it there because our methodology at AFSC is pilot, demonstrate, as Patrick was saying. If it works, then we can go and duplicate and expand. So if that interests you to get food to the daycares, it's an interesting market if you're a small farmer because the quantity that 3-year-olds eat is a lot smaller than what an 8th grader eats. So it's a really good market for if you're a small scale to get your food into the daycares. And like the schools, they plan out their menu by the month, so they know that month what they're going to need. So you actually have time to plant and kind of count on what they're going to buy. So, and then the kids love coming out for field trips. State law says that all daycares have to do 1 food activity a month. So that's required for their licensure. So we've been working with the daycares on meeting that by coming out to field trips at our farms, having farmers come to the classrooms. So it's a really good win-win for the daycares. And right now, with help from a funder, we're subsidizing because price point, as we talked about yesterday, price point is always an issue. I know Mario brought that up about the schools paying a fair price so that you're not cutting your throat to get food to kids. So the daycares have a really tiny budget that's fixed, and the farmers need to be able to make a living, and there's a gap in between. So right now, AFSC is able to use some grant funding to bridge that gap. But I'm meeting with Presbyterian Hospital at the end of the month to talk about how maybe they would want to bridge that gap. And what kind of convinced them to meet with me was that their competitor, Blue Cross Blue Shield, is subsidizing daycares in North Carolina, their home state of Blue Cross. So that kind of got them interested in like, oh, we can, we can be like them. We can be better than them. So they're going to meet with me to talk about how, and the reason why Blue Cross is doing it in North Carolina is they actually thought long term that if they're getting to kids at that age group around healthy eating, the impact on health in the state and on the cost of healthcare in that state, there's actually, they can map that out and say, this is going to bring down diabetes and childhood obesity. So they took that on as an initiative. We also saw in Wisconsin, the Kellogg Foundation subsidizing daycare food. So we looked at like 5 states that are doing programs, and so we want to be the one in New Mexico to start reaching the little kids. And it's been really fun for me to be in the daycares. I'm a foster mom. I have a 1.5-year-old, so it's kind of fun for me to see the little kids eating our vegetables and fruits and liking it. And they can tell the difference. And very quickly on that, in Chaparral, we have a farm next to a daycare in Chaparral. And we were growing broccoli with New Mexico State University about 4 or 5 years ago. And I was out there harvesting broccoli one morning, and the daycare director came running outside to talk to me. I'm sorry if you've heard this story before, because I've told it before. But she said, what is this broccoli? Is it a hybrid? Did you cross-pollinate it with something? I said, no, it's just broccoli. She's like, no, you did something to the broccoli. She said, my kids are asking for seconds of it. And I've never had my kids ask for seconds of broccoli. These are like 3 and 4-year-olds. The kids could taste the difference between freshly harvested, because the farm is next to the daycare, freshly harvested broccoli coming to their plate rather than frozen, reheated, boiled broccoli. And they were asking for seconds. So if we can get the kids little, they get that palate for healthy food. That's the goal. So this is a new project of AFSC that we just started in April. And we'd love to try it out in your community too. So yeah, this is just an overview. And we have a few minutes, so I wanted to open it up and see if there are questions from folks or comments about how we do our work or what you're thinking about this, because you're our partners in it.
You had mentioned pilot, replicate, and what else was it?
Pilot, incubate.
And what? Oh, okay. That was my question.
Demonstrate? Okay. All right. Matthew always has a question. Great. Or a comment. You have a comment, I bet.
I always, I'm a talker, I like to talk. I was wondering, you guys are going to work with daycares. And, are you guys open to help, like a current program that already has structure for a daycare? Structure for local food? Well, see, like at the Santa Fe Community College, it already has 16 raised beds with a daycare right there. In the daycare, they have 2 more raised beds. So is there a possibility to be able to work with that structure, which is already there? You know what I mean? And I'm kind of trying to help with that structure. So, I like the idea of a daycare, and like you said, they have, like, people or kids like it when the garden's just right there. Well, the garden's just right there. It already has the structure for it. We have a commercial kitchen right there. We have the seed bank right there. It's all structured. It's the support, it's just, what I've noticed is with this kind of, field, it's the lack of people getting involved that kind of hinders us from doing a lot of good things. We don't have the personnel for it. We have the ideas. We have the land. The water's semi there, you know what I mean? But it's the lack of people that we have. So I was just curious.
So to answer Matthew's question, yeah, we can talk more after the gathering about it. And I started off this morning saying I really feel like being a farmer is a calling. It's a really special person that farms, and we need you because we all need to eat. But yeah, it's always the people. I can't tell you how many times we get phone calls at the office. Hey, I have a piece of land. Can you find someone to farm it? That's why you see the first thing on there is farmer training. Wanting to make sure we have the producers, so we have the production, so the daycares can have consistent food for their menu. So let's talk about it, because that's the important part.
I've been donated to that daycare.
You've been donating? Okay.
I also been helping with it's like a campus cover. It's like a food bank at community college. Yeah. We also donate to that as well.
Yeah, there's food banks at colleges now. Yeah. Well, let's talk more after about that specific one, what it could look like. Are there other comments or feedback on the vision? Shahid.
I was just wondering if there's any attention given to the idea of maybe a shared admin support, because I think when the handoff happens, I think that's the biggest gap that people haven't necessarily prepared for. And I don't know that they can. I think that requires a skill set that people can't just pick up necessarily. And some people are more, apt to that and can handle it. And I think that having as this network grows, there might be some wisdom in creating a shared admin, some kind of apparatus that allows us all to. Because if you're talking about, once again, you're going to be invoicing, you're going to be, doing all of this stuff that I know slips through the cracks. People don't have time for it, then they get behind, and then all of that stuff just doesn't happen.
That's a really great question, and a little bit later today we're going to talk about building a statewide network and what would you need to be able for that to work for you. And I'm glad you brought up that question because the first incubation project we had was the Agricultura Network. So AFSC incubated that. It was our vision in 2007, and we applied for a USDA grant. We got turned down the first time. They said, impossible. No way you can build 15 farms in the South Valley and feed the Albuquerque public schools. We proved them wrong. And so we reapplied in 2008. We rewrote the grant to really spell out how we do it. And we were so successful, the USDA flew in all 42 other grantees in the country, Alaska, everywhere, to come visit our project and take a bus and come see how we did it. So, yeah. But from 2009 to 2012, we trained farmers, built 9 passive solar cold frames so they could grow during the school year, and sold to the Albuquerque public schools. And we had a broker. We had someone who could invoice. I was actually the one delivering the food, because that was the delivery driver, just to pitch in. And when we turned that project over to Agricultura Network, because that's always our goal, is we don't want them dependent, we want to thrive on its own, we learned that we had to do a bridge year and that we couldn't just turn it over. People weren't ready. And so we were able to ask a funder to help bridge it and pay an admin person who could do the brokering, the invoicing, because they weren't yet bringing in enough money to take that percent, put it in the bank account, and pay someone. So we were able to do that bridge year. Plus, we had to make sure the knowledge from AFSC doing all the brokering and delivering and certification and insurance got transferred to someone. And we thought that was going to happen, and we had someone leave. So you lose that institutional memory. So that's a good point, because we learned in that situation that 3 years wasn't enough, and we needed that bridge year. And then I know with Solitiera, with your co-op, we tried to give some support for a little while so that you could have a broker and someone who could do the invoicing, but that's a really hard piece to be able to fund and to pay someone fairly for the time. And your delivery issue in the South, too, is a really big one. So you're very spread out. So that's helpful feedback, because when we get to talking about building out a statewide network, it's a question we have for the group. Is it better to decentralize, because they're all so different, if you're urban or rural, if you're spread among the South, if you're closer in the North is pretty spread too, and seeing Shane nod his head up in Abiquiu, like, you guys are really spread. Do we decentralize it? Do we have one person? Like, what would that look like? And I think that tour yesterday at the Cooperative Development Center at La Matanita kind of gets a sense of how do they do distribution, how do they figure that out. So that's a really important one. And we have been learning from our own experiences, but can you bring it back up again in a little bit too? Because I think this is a good question and good feedback for, like, what should AFSC be putting resources towards? What should we be helping to support this network? And I'm being told to slow down. All right. Other comments or?
Just to speak to that, I think I haven't seen the movies that are going to be shown later, but in talking about increasing capacity, that's part of that. So there's the production capacity, and there's the administrative capacity, and a big part of a big component of the training program is the business planning and business. So, like we talk about this big piece of work, all the way from the farm to the end user, or from the community at large. And so I agree with I want to repeat, that's good feedback, and that's something that we need to work on in terms of the capacity building. But there's also a need for us to recognize all the different areas that we're looking at. There's the production, and there's the technical side of how to actually grow the food and harvest it and take care of that crop. But then there's the business end, and especially from a cooperative standpoint, for each farmer, each farmer has to handle their own business, right? And then go into the setting of a cooperative and be part of this collective decision-making board. So there's that engagement, there's that capacity. How do you handle your own business, and how do you pay your bills, versus how do you and then transition and collectively work with a group to manage that business and pay those bills, and be run. Like I thought the CEC tour was really great because it illustrates. I mean, we're talking about pennies, and I know in our farm training, I'm constantly saying, do the math. We have to do the math. Do the math. How many square feet is it? How many linear feet? Do the math. I mean, so it's really about math, it's about building up that capacity. I think these films are going to touch on that. I mean, it's not going to be an instructive thing, but it's going to talk about the challenges that moving from handling your own business to doing something collectively, and then if we're going to talk about doing something regionally. What is the realistic needs or obligations that we have, like to make this function? We're going to need people growing, but there's also going to need people making calls, generating invoices, making sure the trucks are running, the deliveries are there. So there's we talk about this. This is a process, and we're growing this out. So these are some things. I appreciate you, and I think that's something that we need to hold. Not forget in that when we're working in these communities to incubate and turn over, that we're turning over something. Something we've talked about in other aspects of the training program, whether we're training the farmers or training trainers. It's really important to not set people up to fail. We want to set people up for success, and that's a part of that, the empowering thing, right? We want to demonstrate success, demonstrate something viable, so that when we stand back, and there's also the reality of the conditions that we're living in, and some things do need to be subsidized, like Saida was talking about, the price point for daycares, the price point at the public schools sectors, like that has to be subsidized. So this is part of the planning, is where do we find resources to subsidize that until the business can and the conditions change to where it is a viable or a self-sustaining thing. But those are things we need to be aware of, and anyway.
All right, this next hour, we have one more hour, then we're going to take a break. We have some inspiring films and discussions to have around co-ops, and again, I recognize there are 3 co-ops in the room, and there are people talking about wanting to make a co-op. Sophia, did you have a question?
And then I guess I'll talk about it afterwards in terms of the co-ops, but I think that, again, some of the weaknesses are those administrative weaknesses, because farmers, we don't necessarily focus on that. That's kind of like, I mean, we've been doing this now for 7 years in terms of a formal farm kind of whatever, and that's the thing that we never have dealt with, is the administrative part of it, the budgeting, that kind of, those 2 issues are extremely important in terms of success. And I think a lot of us that come from a social justice perspective, that's always the end here, and we need to figure out how to privilege that a little bit more, and not in a sense of that it's totally capitalistic, but so that we can feel comfortable about it. And then just one other thing in terms of all this rubrics and stuff that people design and popular education. I just want to make a commentary on that, because I think that too gets co-opted, just like co-ops get co-opted. And La Montanita is one of those that's really been co-opted in the last 2 years. There's been a lot of controversy in terms of how La Montanita is handling its business and even dealing with farmers. So yesterday the presentation was good, but I'm not too sure in actual practice, if they're a co-op, shouldn't they be supporting co-ops, right? And it doesn't seem that was real strong. So I think that's something to reflect on when you're developing a co-op. I think farmers in general don't want to be political, but there's nothing more political than your water and your land, you know what I'm saying? So I think that the times are going to dictate and demand that farmers become more political, and that we become more kind of, you know, with popular education, it's always assumed that we're giving it to the people, yet I think what farming and even what this project has demonstrated is the knowledge is coming from the people itself. So it's not that old kind of classed perspective of popular education for the unknowing, right? And I think we, you know, that's something to reflect on when we start looking at models, and if we really want to be faith in practice, then, you know, then we need to kind of challenge our theory a little bit more. And I just want to give an example of like promotoras. Promotoras in Mexico were very politicized people that move political social justice issues forward. Here in the United States, in my opinion, the concept of promotora has been totally co-opted. It's no longer people that are working to empower people in the communities. They meet in those arenas, but the concept, in my opinion, has been totally disempowered. It's now associated with the job and with someone that's working for a 501c3 to do that. And I think that we need to kind of reflect on that kind of stuff, because I think there's a real big difference from the way promotoras work and are perceived and perceive themselves in third world countries or Mexico as a way they're perceived in this country, and kind of the role is very different. And I think we have to have political discussions about those kinds of things, because, you know, it's one of those things of like, you don't deal with your nutrition at the end, you're going to have to deal with the disease, right? So I think, you know, even as farmers, not that we need to be politicized animals or political animals, but I think we need to come to the realization that water's political, food is political, and eventually we're going to have to deal with some of this stuff, you know what I'm saying? But anyway.
Thank you, Sophia. So in terms of the film, it's a 4-minute film, and I'm not sure about the translations. The people in the film are Spanish speakers, and then it's translated into English, so I don't know how it's going to work the other way. Okay. So what I'm hoping is that the film is Spanish with English subtitles. That's, I know.
I think that's what it is. I think the people are speaking in Spanish, but then it's over English.
Mike, do you know where the lights are for this? No? Oh, look, I figured it out. Okay, so 4 minutes, and then we want to discuss the film, and I am hoping that it's in Spanish with English. Okay.
I come from a very poor family. We just work in the fields. That's why I saw that I could help parents. And I decided to come here to keep helping them. Catalina Basurto came to the U.S. from Mexico almost 7 years ago. Until recently, she worked as a day laborer cleaning homes. But in less than a year, she's gone from waiting for work on a Brooklyn street corner to owning an environmentally friendly cleaning business with 4 other Mexican women. I feel good because we've achieved dreams we didn't think we could. They call it the Apple Eco-Friendly Cleaning Cooperative. Before we finish cleaning, we boil an apple and cinnamon so it leaves a delicious smell. I have a 13-year-old son. The hardest time for a single mother is being without work. Now I don't depend on a boss. We're worker owners. The women in the cooperative met at a local day labor hiring site in Brooklyn.
In a typical morning, there is approximately from 20 to 40 or 50 women from 7 o'clock in the morning waiting for an employer to come and pick them up for a few hours of work. We believe that many of the women are undocumented, and also because of their documentation status, many of
we would be doing the training. So, you know, we've always talked about that was always kind of a common core, because I'd look at like, well, what state programs are kind of already going on fulfilling that, where we could just be an arm in it. But then when that was just on the training piece for like thinking of the women that would like help package prep and do things on that end. But when you talk about the farmers, I think a real conversation is about, well, what's the means to sustain in this year or 2 or 3 that it will take to really get off a sound business, especially for our, people that are like raising families and kids, and they, the spouse or so might not be comfortable with it. And so there's this fear and reluctance to it. Because, we showed you the lands that Jemez has to farm. But the question of why the farmer is a big question for Jemez too, in our tribe and where we're at. Because if we have that much land and we have the water, why isn't it happening? But I think it goes back to, well, people are now living the modern life and they're stuck into bills, and they got to make sure they're paying that next credit card or car payment or whatever else. And so it's like, how do we remind them, or maybe that's just the way we can talk to other farmers, is how do you get past that hump? It's a lot of sacrificing on our end. For us, it's, we're lucky that we have like side work through our other work and what we've done, or being contractors, but at the same time, it is a struggle, when you're raising a family, and we just happen to be in fortunate positions to take this lead. But eventually, when we want to pull these others along, like, is there some way that we can help farmers in this gap, of a small little, I don't know if it's salary, or how do we build that into what we're selling? And I know that was a question in being able to record and document what we're generating, because year 1, we wanted to be able to generate enough so that you would put that back into operational costs, or at least fulfill some kind of salary, or show a farmer that you're making this much per hour in this sense. So it just kind of makes more sense to them, and why they're just going to leave their current job now, so I don't know where I went with that, but as a topic for conversation, and for those co-ops that are already existing, plus farmers that are successful.
Thank you, Eileen. And I think you brought up something a lot of people can relate to. This isn't like a silver bullet, but when we created the Training 1.0 program, the one that USDA said was impossible, and then we ended up doing it, we made sure that everyone in the training program was given a monthly stipend, because we recognized that, like you said, how do you grow food, and it can take you 60 days before you can get a harvest. What do you do in the meantime? You put all your money as a farmer up front, as you all know, because you're all farmers. You don't recuperate that maybe for months. And if you have a crop failure, like grasshopper plague that we've had the last couple of years, what do you do? So at AFSC, we provided, and we do this still for some of our 1.0 programs, a stipend. And we really had to make that case to our funders that was an important part of why we needed the funding. We really had to convince the USDA that we need to fund people, because if they have to work a job to support themselves and try to farm, the farm won't happen. You can't do it. So that has been one way that we've tried as a nonprofit to support people when they're in a training program. But I'd love to think of more models, and I think that's your broader question, is how do we support people before they bring in the income? And the thought with our program was, you get the monthly stipend, and then by the time you're done with the full year, your harvest starts to come in, and you're starting to supplement that stipend with sales of food. And we fully subsidize the farms, the seeds, the irrigation systems, the soil amendments, the tractor work. So people didn't have to put any money in and go into debt and get a loan. So that's been one thing that we've tried, but I would be interested if there are other models out there, or how do we support beginner farmers?
That's an excellent point. I think that coming from my own experience and my background, I know that we don't necessarily talk about it a lot, but most small businesses are capitalized. They have investors. Nobody expects you to take off, from the time you open your doors and actually start making money. And the expectation is 3 to 5 years before you can actually even start to build a reserve. So we have to start thinking about it in that way. Like, well, these are small businesses we're talking about, and we're saying, go out and do this stuff and establish a market, and there's not even capital to purchase seeds. So I know that there are, I've been kind of looking at some FSA and USDA grants that are available for small farms and beginning farms, grants, and also small low interest loans. Those things are available. That's another one of those things that's like it's almost a full-time job to, first of all, find those grants and then actually like start grant writing. I usually close the door when I just look at like how much time it's going to take to actually write the grant with no guarantee that you're even going to get the grant, you know. So I think that just to support what you were saying is like this is not some, you know, concept that's really, you know, just like that we have to deal with. Most small businesses go to a bank and say, hey, I did a business plan. I want to start this business. I'm going to need $250,000 to capitalize this business for 3 years. And we're not talking like that, but it's probably realistic when we look at our expenses and say, what does this cover? What's this, you know, stipend cover? It covers a little and it's helpful. But in terms of what our real needs are, we need to figure that out, like how to tap into all the different resources that are available.
Any other comments on this, Phil? Or comments? Yeah.
The ag department, is it possible to like, you know, develop some kind of a policy campaign with legislators and a few friendly legislators, maybe NMSU and the ag department to kind of support something like that? Because there is a lot of, not a lot of money, but there is a lot of the farm trend. It would seem that if AFSC has a track record of this, that would be like a good, you know, you already have a track record for producing something like this that's necessary, because I think it's kind of like a double-edged sword. You need all the stuff that you talked about, yet at the same time, when people get used to the funding, then what are we creating? You know what I'm saying? If people get used to being funded in farms, that's not the model of farming. So in a lot of ways, and again, that's an AFSC or different programs. Do you help the farmer? I mean, you have to do both, help the farmer as well as help those people that are wanting to be farmers. But if there's 12 people that are being trained, how many are being kept and going into farming or whatever? I mean, that might be something to look at also, because what I'm seeing too in Albuquerque is that people go through a training and everybody wants to be a trainer. Nobody wants to be a farmer, right? Everybody now, in Albuquerque, everybody wants to be a consultant because that's kind of the new poverty pimp thing, right? I mean, I'm serious. Like there are more consultants in Santa Fe about every single issue that you want to talk about, but they don't have any experience in those issues, but they're good facilitators. It's kind of like this technocratic thing that we're living under the age of globalization, right? So, you know, I think that needs to be addressed a little bit, because when we have more trainers and consultants in farming than we do farmers, that's a problem too, right? And so, you know, it's just something to think about, because it's necessary. We're benefiting from that. It's really helped us in terms of Los Sardinas to be able to have that pay for the trainee, so that we can, you know, develop some other stuff. So it's, you know, we're not dumb, of course it helps, but at the same time, you know, what are we creating in a way when everybody thinks, you know, you're going to be subsidized somehow, you know what I'm saying, by foundations, not necessarily by the government. I don't have a problem being subsidized by the government because I pay taxes, so I figure it's just getting my money back. But, you know, anyway.
I think Alan had something to share on that.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alan Oliver. I'm with the Thornburg Foundation, and I just want to say just a couple of really quick things. First off, love the dialogue. This is really, from a funder perspective, it's really, really helpful to hear. And I just wanted to make sure, because I heard a couple of things that I just want to make sure that folks are aware are happening. So NMSU Extension and New Mexico First for the last 2 years have been working with they had 13 regional meetings and 600 stakeholders engaged, and they identified something that you guys were talking about, which is fantastic, that folks are on the same page of how the barriers to beginning farmers are huge, and that some of the things that they identified and are going to be lobbying the legislature on and local governments on is around apprenticeship programs and increasing access to apprenticeship programs and funding those programs. land access so that beginning farmers have kind of that access to land where the owners would like folks using that land, sort of something you referred to, Sarah, and then capital and credit, so that for beginning farmers that, you know, if you're a student and you have loans, is there loan forgiveness for you? If you are, and if you know, tax credits to kind of ease you into the process, and then just broader capital access. And so if these are things that are important to you, this is going to be going to the legislature in over the next 2 years. And I think if you want to lend your voice there, I think that would be more than, you know, very much welcome. So just that. Thanks.
I think Patrick had something to add.
I just wanted to quickly point out or make some comments on some of the things I've heard. All these are really, really good comments because they illustrate the complexity and the range of challenges that we're facing. And I think to what I think what Eileen and Shahid were talking about, I think in our training program we talk a lot about, again, going back to the business and the business planning, and acknowledging the fact that most businesses fail. So we have to be, I mean, planning is so essential. So understanding the real costs of what it what it takes to start the business and to keep the business moving forward. And some of the things that Sophia was talking about, I think there's a real need for groups or individuals to decide how they're going to operate. Is it going to be a 501c3? Are they offering services and doing other broader community stuff, or is it a business? And in the business, there are, I think FSA. I don't know how they are with co-ops, but for private, sole proprietors, there are loan programs, but you have to have collateral to get the capital. If you're landless and you don't have asset, there's that. On the cooperative side, rural development has grant opportunities, but you have to be a co-op. You can't be an LLC. You can't be this. You can't be that. You have to be a cooperative. And then there's all the administrative realities of applying for the grant and managing the grant, which are challenging for a federal government. And with La Cosecha, I think that's one of the things that's really important in terms of the being realistic about a business and the consistency. We have heard that from every buyer. The demand is there. I mean, we just know this. The demand is there, but because of how the economic structure that we live in, that demand is, we want it like this, right? You're a farmer. Farming, it really doesn't necessarily work like that. So there's all these things that farmers and producer co-ops or producers have to structure their supply chain to meet the demand the way consumers want it. The big challenge up north was with La Cosecha, the 3 years that they were operating, every year they practically doubled their sales. But the issue there was, it was not collectively, they did not own storage and aggregating facilities. It was based with a partner. And when that partnership fell through and we no longer had the infrastructure, we had no longer a place to store and distribute or store and aggregate, we lost all that opportunity. And so the demand the demand is still there, but if we can't realistically meet that demand, that market opportunity goes away, and therefore that market goes away. Therefore, there goes the incentive for producers to participate. So it just, again, this is just illustrating a lot of the challenges that we're looking at. And what Mario is absolutely correct. And going back to what Sophia was saying, I think of Paul Mooney. To paraphrase, everybody wants to be a farmer. Nobody wants to be a farmer. Everybody wants to talk, and that's what we say. That's why this program is about doing. And I just applaud all you guys because you guys do it, but it's hard. and to do it to meet again the demand. Yeah, the demand is there, but they want it like that. They want pineapples in the winter from New Mexico. Do you guys sell pineapples? No, we don't. You have watermelons in January? No, we don't. So this is that challenge in again, you know, we're making the road by walking it. We have to meet those challenges, and this is really important to hear these things, because if we hear them, this is how we can address them. But really, the business side of things are incredibly important, and the fact is, a business has to operate like a business, and we have to meet those challenges of getting that initial injection of capital and having a business plan for how you're going to cover those operational costs until you can get the production up and generating that revenue, where then you can siphon off some of that revenue to cover your operation costs. But until then, there has to be a contingency plan, or not a contingency plan, but there has to be a way to identify that capital until we can get to that point. But going back to the planning, that we have to have those plans. I mean, like we talk in the training program, by January, you need to have your production plan for the whole year done. You need to be knowing what you're doing in September, August, in January. So the same thing with our business. We have to know what we're going to be doing, not just this year, but 5 years down the road, and put that into place. And those are just the challenges that we're facing, and they're across the board. And this is why it's kind of slow work. But I'm not. I just wanted to repeat what I'm hearing, and if that makes sense, I don't know.
A couple of things I would just want to share about that I mentioned earlier. We had an 8-year review of our work, and we found that 75% of the people we trained are still farming. So it's a pretty good number. And I think the reason why that number is so high is the way that we choose people to join the program. So those of you who've been through our program know that we do an interview. We want to know, do you really want to be a farmer? Because we don't need more people that want to talk about farming. We want people who are going to be a farmer. So we really look at folks. Do you have access to land and water? Is this what you're being called to do? Is this what you need to become a farmer? So that's why we have such a high rate of people who stay farming in our program. And talking to the folks in Chamisal, the apprentices there, another thing that we try to do is that by the time you graduate from our program, that you have a working farm, that we've actually put the training program at your farm so that you graduate with land that has an irrigation system, that you have seeds, that you have stuff growing, that you have markets, and you have the ability to join a co-op. So we tried that in Anthony. I know that when we worked with Mario for 3 years, trying to build up a farm that you could have, but it wasn't your land, but trying to get that going. And in Chamisal, going back to Patrick's comment about the plan, we're happy to give support to get you guys going. But the contingent thing is you have to show us your business plan. You show us your business plan, we have money to pay to get your farm going. And you've done your trainings, as you shared yesterday. You guys were an awesome presentation. You've done your trainings at each other's farms, so you're building up your farm. So that's part of our model, right? This isn't theoretical. It's hands-on. It's at the land. We want you to graduate with a working farm. And I think that's why we have such a high percentage of people who stay farming when they graduate. It's because we're doing it there and you graduate with a working farm. That's our goal. Doesn't always happen that way, but that's the best way that we've tried it. I think Maria wants to show a little bit, another clip. Okay.
I was just wondering to all the farmers and the groups and everyone that are here, if maybe there's a way we can communicate not just at the annual meetings, but throughout the year, talking about what the demands are. So as we're talking with farmers and we're getting information on regions and what's best to grow, we can look at where we're at in Jemez and with our farmers so that we can begin to build for that need. But I also think if you guys have schools or areas you're working with and know we can do so much, but we still need this, it would be nice if we spoke to each other to say, well, do you have this going? And maybe some of our next conferencing or our meetings could actually be like roundtable discussions with us about like, well, I have this much growing this season, we're projecting this, can you feel that? So we really become that big, not entity, because I think the reason why, and we talked about the funding and why it's taking us this like real slow approach to like, how do we even ask for funding? like it took a lot for us to even like decide, is AFSC right? Not in that way, but to any organization we were going to partner with, because we've seen, and you know, for some of us that worked with tribes or with programs, you change your vision for that funding. And it was so much of our like strictly rooted concept. No. We always, when people are like strictly roots, we're like, well, strictly rooted, you know, in who we are, our vision, how we're doing this. We're not going to tear, you know. But it for us, it was really like, how can we, now that we've really gained a relationship, and as for me, when I leave after meeting, you know, you guys in the last ones from last year, is like, well, we already have all this stuff in place pretty much, you know, how can we continue this conversation? So if you need something down south that we have up north, and you know, vice versa, we can start filling those gaps ourselves. So
I'm really excited Eileen said that, because after our break, that is the conversation. How do we build this statewide network? So it's exactly what Eileen said. It's exactly what's been happening. And we have an informal network. So Eileen came last year and this year. This is our 6th year. And so what we've been building is what Eileen's describing, but it's been informal. So when farmers at La Cosecha del Norte Co-op in the Española Valley had a sale to the schools, the Taos schools 2 years ago, they couldn't fill the whole order. But they knew that the farmers at Agricultura Network, the co-op that AFSC started in Albuquerque, had some of that food. So because of our statewide gatherings, they were able to call the farmers they had met through AFSC down here, and Patrick actually delivered the food from Albuquerque up to Española. So though we have lots of examples of how people are already building out this network for this vision, so that Jemez could join in, or if your school sales, if you come and you realize we can't fill the whole order, that there are people in this room that might support getting food to your kids. So that is the conversation for the rest of the day after the break, is to talk about what would it look like and what would people need for this statewide network to become more formal, to be more operational, because it's been going on for about 5 years. It's our 6th year, but we really want to get it to a new place. So you led us right into the next discussion.
Because I think, you know, what you said is very interesting, and we're talking about funding, and there's funders here. And I think that's, you know, that's a real important conversation, because when we're talking about policy, I mean, in New Mexico, also what we're seeing, not only everybody wants to be a trainer, everybody wants to be a poet, right? No, I'm just kidding. But at the same time, when we talk about policy, I hope that the Thornburg and other folks that are working on policy are coming to these groups that have, and you're here, so that tells me that you are, because I think a lot of times in New Mexico, we're seen as this poverty state where every foundation can come here and kind of put its agenda on the folks here, and that's, to me, that's a colonial model, you know what I'm saying? And what you're talking about, once you, I mean, that's just a reality, right? Foundations have RFPs, and they change pretty much, just like AFSC, maybe even all of us change our goals, and so I think that's real interesting for, you know, not only us to reflect on that, but for foundations to reflect on that. Who are your partners when you go into a policy making arena, and are there people that are doing that thing so that they can really direct the policy so that it serves us? Because in New Mexico, and it's probably happening across the country. I mean, many years ago, New Mexico had books written about all the nurse midwives in New Mexico, all the Indian and Chicana nurse midwives that were in New Mexico. Today, there are no nurse midwives, maybe 5 Chicana or Indian nurse midwives. Almost all the indigenous and Chicana folks are now doulas, because once, you know, once people get into the field, then they want to create requirements that basically end up basically marginalizing us even more, right? Physical therapy. Physical therapy used to be a master's, now it's a PhD program. So all these things, we need to really kind of watch what's going on, because when people aren't really connected to the culture of a lot of the policy stuff can actually be detrimental, not useful to us, right? And in the food, it's at one place where that's really having an impact also. A lot of the regulations that are being developed, even by some of our liberal friends, are actually having a negative impact on us. So I think it's real important that you're here. I'm thankful that you're here, because this is a program that's worked for many years and has a track record north to south. And there's a lot of co-optation going on in New Mexico right now, and I think we need to be real clear about it. I know people always in our organization, my co-director is the fundraiser. They call me the fund loser, but that's okay. Everybody has to have a purpose in life.
That's awesome, Sophia. This has been such a rich discussion. Thank you. We're not going to show the second film because I think people are ready to take a break and then get right into how are we going to cooperatively support each other. And I don't think we need to watch the second film, which was called How Cooperatives Work, and it was looking at Mondragon and looking at co-ops around the United States that have been around for like decades and what they struggled with. But it's a 20-minute video online, so we can just send you the link if you want to watch how people, what were the issues that their co-ops faced and how did they become successful. But that first one was great. So we're going to take a 15-minute break. If you, again, a beautiful patio, if you want to go outside, get snacks and drinks. And then we'll come back at 11:15. Please be back at 11:15, because our last hour together is to really think through this vision of a statewide network. So thank you for the awesome discussion.